The rain had been falling since morning, not in loud crashing waves, but gently, like the sky was remembering something sad. It made everything feel slower, softer. The city was wrapped in that quiet kind of gray that made you think of old songs and unfinished letters. Mira watched the rain from the window of her brother's house. She had come to visit after almost 2 years. Life had taken her through too many storms lately. Her divorce was recent, and though the paperwork was finished, the feelings were not. She was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She had always been the strong one in the family, the dependable aunt, the stable daughter, the quiet wife. But over time, strength had turned into silence, and silence had turned into loneliness. Her nephew Armin came home just after lunch. She almost didn't recognize him at first. The boy who used to build pillow forts in her living room was now a man, taller, broader, and with a calmness in his face that made her pause. "Masi," he said, smiling as he stepped inside and shook the rain off his jacket. "You look the same, still beautiful." She laughed, brushing her damp hair behind her ears. "I look tired, but I'll take that compliment." He walked over and hugged her. It was a warm, strong hug, not the quick, distracted ones people gave out of habit, but the kind that made you feel like you were really seen. She hadn't been hugged like that in a long time. They sat on the sofa and talked. Small things. Big things. He asked about the divorce, but didn't press. He didn't judge, just listened. And she found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone. How she felt like she was disappearing in her marriage. How love had turned into routine. How loneliness can exist even in a shared bed. He didn't try to fix it. He just nodded and said softly, "You've carried too much for too long." Then, he added, "You need to let yourself be taken care of, just for a little while." She smiled sadly. "I don't know how to do that anymore." He looked at her, serious now. "Let's start small. There's this massage place I go to. Quiet, clean, peaceful. Let me take you?" She hesitated. It felt strange. Her nephew, offering her comfort like this. But something in his voice made her want to say yes. Maybe it was the way he said, "Let me take you." Like she deserved to be taken care of. Not as an obligation, but as something gentle, something human. And maybe, deep down, a part of her just wanted to feel human again. So she nodded. "Okay." The drive was quiet. The rain tapped gently on the windows. The streets were wet and empty, and the world outside felt like it was pausing for a moment, like even time was giving her space to breathe. When they reached the massage parlor, Mira hesitated again. It was a small place tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. There was a soft bell at the door and a faint smell of lemongrass in the air. "Trust me," Armin said, gently placing a hand on her back as he guided her inside. And for some reason, she did. The receptionist welcomed them warmly. Armin booked 2 sessions, one for each of them. He handed her a robe and smiled. "You'll thank me after." Mira stepped into the dim room, took a deep breath, and let herself be still. The soft music playing, the warmth of the table, the quiet hands of the therapist. Everything was designed to make her forget the outside world. But it wasn't just the massage that melted something inside her. It was the feeling that someone, for once, had seen her pain and wanted nothing from her but to heal. When she came out, Her eyes felt lighter. Her face was softer. She found Armin waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. He looked up. "So?" She smiled. "You were right." He grinned. "I usually am." She walked beside him, her arm brushing his, and for a moment, just a small, fleeting moment, she felt the kind of peace that doesn't come from oils or soft music, but from being cared for without expectation. It was the first time in years she had let someone hold her pain without asking them to, and she didn't know it yet, but that small moment would echo far louder than she ever imagined. The massage parlor was warm and inviting, almost like stepping into a memory you never knew you had. The lighting was soft, like candlelight, and the faint scent of lavender and eucalyptus floated through the air, calming Mira's nerves the moment she walked in. She looked around slowly, taking in the clean walls, the quiet music, the slow rhythm of people moving in silence. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. It felt safe. Armin stood beside her, speaking to the receptionist in low tones. Mira observed him quietly. There was something different about him now, not just his height or the faint stubble on his jaw, but the way he carried himself. Grounded, gentle. Sure. He handed her a key to the locker and smiled. "Go ahead and change. I booked you with my usual therapist. She's good. You'll feel brand new after." She nodded, still a little unsure, still not fully used to being cared for without needing to ask. But there was something in his eyes, so kind, so sincere, that made it easier to accept. Inside the changing room, Mira slipped out of her clothes and wrapped herself in the soft white robe. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her body didn't look like it used to. There were faint lines around her eyes now, slight shadows under them, a curve in her shoulders from years of carrying too much. She touched her face gently. There was beauty still there. Tired, yes, but still breathing, still alive. She stepped into the massage room. It was dimly lit, a small heater humming softly in the corner. The therapist, a kind woman with a calm smile, greeted her and gestured to the table. As Mira lay down, face pressed into the cradle, she felt her muscles tighten. Part of her was scared to relax, scared to let go. But then, the therapist began. Slow. Careful hands pressed into her shoulders, her neck, the small of her back. There was no rush, no sharpness, just rhythm, like waves returning to shore. The pressure wasn't just physical. It felt emotional too, like someone was peeling away months of silence, of holding it all in. She didn't realize when the tears started. They weren't loud. They didn't shake her body, just soft drops slipping down her cheeks and onto the towel below. The therapist didn't say anything, just worked quietly, respectfully, like she understood. Outside the room, Armin waited. He sat on a bench in the hallway, scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing up as people passed. But his mind wasn't on his messages. He was thinking about Mira. When he was a child, she was his favorite person in the world. The aunt, who always remembered his birthday, who made the best tea, who sat beside him and listened when no one else had time. After his parents' fights, it was Mira who brought him peace. Seeing her now, so tired, so fragile, brought something protective out in him. She had always been the strong one. It felt strange to see her like this, unsure, needing help. But he didn't pity her. He admired her even more. When Mira came out, wrapped in her robe, her hair slightly messy, her cheeks flushed from the warmth, Armin stood up immediately. Their eyes met. She looked softer somehow, lighter. He smiled. Feel better? She gave a small laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Much better. I didn't realize how much I needed that. Good, he said, taking the key from her hand and helping her with her coat. You don't have to carry everything all the time. As they stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The sky was still gray, but the world felt washed, clean. Mira inhaled deeply. The air smelled like wet earth and fresh beginnings. In the car, they didn't speak much, just the soft sound of the engine and the faint hum of the radio. Armin reached over and turned the heater up a little. She smiled at the small gesture. It wasn't the massage that had truly eased her. It was something quieter, something harder to name. It was the feeling of being seen, of someone noticing her pain without making her feel broken, of a boy she used to care for, now becoming a man who cared for her. And though neither of them said it out loud, something had shifted between them, not in a way that needed to be feared, but in a way that needed to be felt. The rain had stopped by evening, but the world still carried that quiet, damp hush that comes after a long downpour. The roads were slick with reflections, of headlights, of passing moments, of things that couldn't be said. Armin turned the car into a narrow lane, pulled into the parking spot beside his small apartment, and switched off the engine. For a moment, he didn't move. Neither did Mira. It was strange, sitting so close in the silence, the heater humming softly, their coats still damp from the mist. Mira felt the weight of the day beginning to settle in her chest, not heavy, but not light either, just full, like her heart was finally remembering how to feel again. Come up, Armin said, finally breaking the silence. I'll cook. You need something warm, something real. She hesitated. It had been a long day, emotionally, more than physically. But the truth was, she didn't want to go back to her brother's house. Not yet. Not to the same guest room that smelled like dust and memories. Not to the same four walls that made her feel like a stranger in her own family. All right, she said softly. But only if I can help. He chuckled. You always say that. Then you sit at the counter and talk while I do all the work. She smiled. Well, someone's got to supervise. The apartment was small, just one bedroom, a cozy living space, and a kitchen that still had dishes drying on the rack. But it felt lived in, personal. A few framed photos on the shelf, a soft gray blanket on the couch, a faint scent of incense lingering in the air. Mira took off her shoes and wandered into the kitchen. Armin handed her a mug of warm water with lemon. Start with this, he said. Helps calm the nerves. She took a sip and leaned against the counter, watching him move around the kitchen. He cooked with ease, like it was something he did often. Chopped onions, stirred the dal, added spices without measuring. Mira noticed how careful he was, wiping the counter as he worked, washing each pan as soon as he used it. You've grown up, she said softly. He looked up, eyebrow raised. You just noticing that now? No. I guess I just forgot how fast time moves, He didn't answer right away, just poured rice into a pot and let the steam rise. Then he said, "You were always the only one who noticed me. Even when I was a mess, you saw me." She looked down at her mug, her fingers tightening slightly around the handle. "You were easy to love," she whispered. They sat down to eat at the small table by the window. Just dal, rice, and a side of crispy okra. Simple. But to Mira, it felt more nourishing than anything she'd had in months. "You used to hate okra," she said between bites. "I still do. But you love it." She looked at him, and for a moment, their eyes held longer than usual. Not awkward. Just full. As if time had slowed to let them see something they hadn't dared admit before. There was a strange comfort between them. A warmth that didn't need explaining. Mira tried to remind herself that he was her nephew, that this was just a quiet evening between family. But something inside her stirred. Something old. Something romantic. Not in a way that asked for more, but in a way that ached with memory, with longing, with a quiet wish for someone to hold her like she mattered. After dinner, Armin washed the dishes while she sat nearby, drying them with a soft cloth. They didn't talk much, just worked in rhythm, like they'd done this before. Like this wasn't the first time they had shared a moment that felt more like a memory than reality. When the last plate was put away, Armin leaned against the sink and looked at her. "You always believed in me, Masi," he said, "even when I didn't believe in myself." She didn't know why that sentence made her eyes sting. Maybe it was the way he said it, so quiet, so certain. Or maybe it was because no one had said anything kind to her in so long. "You were the only thing I ever got right," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. He stepped forward, but didn't touch her. He just looked at her the way people look at stars. Soft, reverent, like they don't want to break the silence. And in that stillness, something passed between them. Not a line crossed, not a word said, but something that stayed. A tenderness that didn't know where to go. A moment suspended between what was right and what simply was. The evening air had cooled by the time Mira stepped out onto Armin's small balcony. The lights of the city twinkled below, quiet and distant, like a million stories playing out behind closed windows. She wrapped his extra shawl around her shoulders and leaned on the railing, breathing in the stillness. Inside, Armin was putting away the last of the dishes. She could hear the clink of ceramic, the soft sound of water running, and the hum of a song he played under his breath. Something old, something gentle. The kind of music people listen to when they don't want to be alone, but don't want to say anything either. She smiled to herself. It felt like a pause between lives. This evening, this closeness, this strange comfort she hadn't known she'd needed. She was still Mira, still the woman who'd left behind a broken marriage and a city full of memories. But right now, she was also just a woman in the quiet night, standing beside someone who made her feel seen. Armand stepped out, holding 2 small cups of tea. He handed one to her without saying a word. Their fingers touched briefly, and even though it was barely more than a brush, Mira felt the warmth travel up her arm, straight to her chest. "Your hands are cold," he said softly, wrapping his own around hers for a moment, just to warm them. She didn't pull away. They sipped their tea in silence, shoulder to shoulder. The city breathed below them. You remember that summer in Shimla? He asked suddenly. She nodded. The one where we got lost in the forest trail? And you lied to the forest guard. Told him we were siblings so we wouldn't get in trouble. He laughed. I was what, 14? You cried when you thought we wouldn't find our way back. You didn't. She smiled. I couldn't. I had to be strong for you. Armin turned toward her. You were always strong for everyone. I just never realized how much that cost you. His voice was so sincere it caught her off guard. She looked down at her tea. Her reflection wobbled in the surface. Something in her heart shifted again, soft, uncertain. I didn't mind, she said, but sometimes I wish someone had been strong for me too. The silence between them thickened, not heavy, but rich with emotion. The kind of silence that holds words people are afraid to say out loud. He set his cup down. You don't have to wish anymore. She turned to him, surprised. But he wasn't smiling. He wasn't playing. There was something in his eyes, raw, unguarded. He reached for her hand again. Held it. This time not to warm it. Just to hold it. And Mira let him. Because in that moment, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like anything the world would understand. But it didn't feel like a mistake either. It felt like truth. A soft truth, aching to be felt. A truth that had lived quietly between them for a long time, hidden under years of distance, age, and unspoken care. His thumb traced the edge of her wrist, and her breath caught. Armin, she whispered. I know. He replied, voice low. You don't have to say it. I know. And he let go. Just like that. No kiss. No confession. Just a moment suspended in almosts. Because some touches aren't meant to last. Some feelings aren't meant to grow. But they happen anyway. She looked away, blinking fast. Not from shame, but from the tenderness of it all. Inside, the clock ticked softly. A reminder that the world still moved, even if their hearts weren't ready to catch up. I should go, she said quietly. He nodded. I'll drive you. She didn't argue. On the drive back, the air between them was quieter than before, but not colder. Just careful, like both of them had opened a door they didn't mean to, and were now gently closing it without slamming it shut. When he dropped her at the gate, she paused before stepping out. Thank you, she said. For the massage? For today. For not turning away when you could have. He gave her a small, sad smile. You've always deserved to be held, Mira. Even if it's only for a moment. She nodded, then closed the door. As he drove away, she watched his taillights disappear into the mist. And in her chest, something fragile pulsed. Not love, not yet, but the echo of what it could be, if the world had been a little softer. The next morning, Mira woke up earlier than usual. The room was still dark, but the first pale light of day was pressing softly against the curtains. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts drifting like mist. The night before kept playing in her mind. Armin's fingers around hers, the warmth of his voice, the way he'd looked at her. Not with confusion, not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Understanding. That's what it was. He had understood her in a way no one else ever had. Not her husband, not her family, not even her closest friends. But what did it mean? She pressed her hand over her chest, as if trying to still her own heartbeat. The air felt heavier now, not because something wrong had happened, but because something unspoken had begun. Mira spent the rest of the morning helping her sister-in-law in the kitchen, answering small questions, folding clothes, playing with the children. But her mind was far away. She caught herself staring out of windows, pausing between tasks, smiling when she didn't feel like smiling. That afternoon, Armin texted her. "Free later? Need some air? Walk?" She stared at the message for a long moment. Her fingers hovered. Okay. They met at a nearby lake, an old haunt from Armin's childhood. The path around it was lined with trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The water rippled softly, like it carried secrets beneath its skin. They didn't speak at first, just walked, side by side, like they'd done 100 times before. Only now there was space between them, not physical, but emotional. A space filled with what they weren't saying. "How was your day?" he finally asked, kicking at a pebble as they walked. "Normal," she replied. But it didn't feel normal. He glanced at her. Mine didn't either. Silence again. The truth stood between them, unspoken and full. Finally, Mira stopped walking and turned to him. "We need to talk." He nodded, as if he'd been waiting. She looked down at her hands. "Last night, I don't know what that was, but I need to be honest. I felt something I shouldn't feel." He stayed quiet, letting her speak. "I'm not stupid," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're younger. Your family. We both know how this looks. What people would say." "Mira," he said gently, "I don't care what people say." "But I do," she whispered. "I have to. I've already lived through judgment, through whispers, through people making me feel like I was never enough." He took a step closer. "You were always enough. You just forgot." She looked up at him then, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What is this, Armand? What are we doing?" "I don't know," he admitted. "All I know is when I'm with you, I don't feel broken. I feel calm. Like I belong." Her breath caught. "This can't be love." "Maybe not. But it feels like the beginning of something, even if it's just healing." She looked away. The water shimmered under the sun, mocking the stillness in her heart. "Do you want more from me?" she asked, quietly. He hesitated. Then, "No. I just want you to know you're not invisible. You're not alone." It was the answer she didn't expect, but the one she needed. Because maybe this wasn't about a romance waiting to happen. Maybe this was about something deeper. Two broken hearts finding light in each other's presence. Not to build a future, together, but to remember they still had one. They kept walking. The space between them was still there, but it didn't feel as sharp now. It was softer, warmer. A space made not of distance, but of respect. When they reached the edge of the lake, Armand paused. "I'm leaving for Delhi next week," he said quietly. "Back to work, to life." She nodded slowly. That's good. You've built something beautiful there. He looked at her for a long moment. So have you, even if it's still just forming. They said goodbye with a hug, longer than usual, but not desperate. It was a hug that said, I see you. I care for you. And that's enough. For now. As she watched him walk away, Mira didn't feel heartbreak. She felt gratitude. Because sometimes, the people who come into your life don't stay forever, but they leave you better than they found you. A week passed, quietly and quickly, like a page turning in a book Mira wasn't ready to finish. The days felt longer, not because of emptiness, but because of awareness. Every moment now seemed touched by something delicate. A memory, a look, a warmth she didn't know she could miss until it wasn't there. Armin had been packing, preparing, reconnecting with his friends in Delhi, setting up meetings for his return. But every time he came home in the evening, they would cross paths briefly, during dinner, in the hallway, near the garden, and their eyes would hold each other for just a second too long. They didn't talk about that night again. They didn't need to. The silence between them had grown into something sacred, an understanding that didn't need words, only time. And time, as always, was running out. It was the night before Armin's departure. Mira sat on the backyard swing, a thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes watching the stars blink into the sky one by one. The swing creaked softly beneath her, like it, too, remembered all the conversations it had once heard. She didn't expect him to come out, but he did. Quiet footsteps. No words. Just the familiar shape of him as he sat beside her on the grass, facing the same dark sky. I used to think you were the strongest person I knew, Armin said after a long pause. She smiled faintly. Used to? I still do. But now I know you were also tired. Quietly. Deeply. And you never showed it. She looked at him. He wasn't the boy she once helped through heartbreak and school bullies. He was a man now. Thoughtful, grounded, scarred in ways life makes us all, but still standing. I didn't want anyone to see the cracks, she admitted, especially not you. I see them now, he said. And they don't make you weak. They make you real. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The stars spun slowly above them. A soft wind rustled the leaves. Then he asked, Will you be okay when I go? Her throat tightened. This time, she didn't pretend. I don't know, she whispered, but I'll try. He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening like he was holding something back. Then he stood up and reached into his pocket. I got you something. She blinked. You didn't have to. I know. I wanted to. He handed her a small leather-bound notebook. It was simple, worn at the edges, like something handmade. She opened it. Inside, on the first page, in his familiar handwriting, were just a few words. For the thoughts you're afraid to say, for the stories only your heart knows. Mira pressed the notebook to her chest, swallowing the lump in her throat. You really see me, she said, more to herself than to him. I always have, he replied, even when I wasn't supposed to. She stood up, facing him. The porch light cast a golden halo around them, catching the softness in their expressions. I don't know what this was between us, she said, but I'll carry it with me. He nodded, voice quiet. So will I. Then, after a pause, he stepped closer. Not to kiss her, not to hold her, just to be near. I don't need a forever with you, he said, but I'm grateful for the moments we had. They were real too. Me too, she whispered. He looked at her for a long second, then smiled, sad and beautiful, a goodbye wrapped in kindness. I'll leave early, he said, before the house wakes up. She nodded. That was how it had to be. Quiet. Clean. Without questions. They said nothing else. No promises. No regrets. Only a silent goodbye between two people who had loved, in their own unspoken way, in the space between boundaries and longing. And when he left the next morning, Mira didn't watch from the window. She stayed in bed, holding the notebook to her chest, letting her tears come, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Because some love stories don't need a climax. Some don't need a label. Some just need to exist, for a little while, to remind us we're alive. In the days that followed, Mira wrote in the notebook every night. Pages filled with thoughts she'd hidden from herself, feelings she had once buried under duty and silence. And slowly, gently, she began to heal. Not because Armin saved her, but because he reminded her she still deserved to be seen, to be held, to be remembered. Even if only for a moment.